Day. Aka's not here today. Got taken away by some family situations. Nothing serious, but so we have Peter back, who was where were you, in the wilds of Manitoba?
I was out in God's country, way up in a place called Nopaming Park, out fishing with my son and my nephew.
Oh, fishing. That's a joy.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I missed that.
Yeah, no, were you in the wilds outside of Winnipeg, Alberta?
Yeah.
I still can't believe that.
There's nothing like baiting a hook all day.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is, I wouldn't mind fishing. I just wouldn't know what the hell to do if I ever caught something. Because
I always threw it back. I mean, I fished with my dad, and we would probably do it once a year when I was a kid. He loved it. I endured it. It was like that. I know how to cast. I could do all of it. It's just not a fun thing for me.
Yeah, no, I have fished off of a dock. I've never caught anything.
Yeah.
You know, probably because the water that I was fishing off of is semi-polluted. So even if I got something, it would probably be some sort of mutated thing.
Or at least it doesn't light on fire.
Well, that's true. Thank you, Cleveland. Okay, we're continuing our overrated, underrated series since we're all such music.
Wait, I still had something. I thought
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I said go ahead. No.
So apparently in British Columbia somewhere, because I'm not going to open the article, some moron was feeding a Timbit to a bear. Now, it looked like a bear cub. And so let's go through this. For one thing, even if it's a bear cub, what is one Timbit going to do? Like, if that's your the idea of you're going to give a snack to a wild animal, which is a dumb idea, but let's just say it's a good idea. Why would you give a Timbit? Of all the things, like, you know, there's so many better donuts in the Tim Hortons world. Like, why would you chintz out and just give a Timbit anyhow?
It's all they had.
No, it's not all they had. They ate the other stuff. You know that. Come on.
But you know what the thing is? This is a symptom of like these stupid commercials where I can't remember what company it is, and better that I don't know because then I get sued by them. But there's this commercial where like three women they're hiking and they come upon this like wild like wolf or hyena or something like that, and it says, "Oh, it's a rescue. We should try to rescue it." And they're like offering, and I'm like, you don't understand. There are people stupid enough to think that that's what you do. That they don't realize this is sarcasm, and you don't like try to. I mean, and if they get attacked, it's their own damn fault.
It is. In the Instagram world, I think we have about like 2,000 deaths a year now for people falling off of mountains and other things, and also thinking they're going to have this great video with like a wild animal, and it's like, you know, what if in that video you get to take home that animal bit off your hand? You know, like how would that be?
Either that or these idiots going up on high places to take cool looking selfies and then crashing to their death. I mean, that's the Darwin Awards. By
the way, I do applaud Canada because they fined the guy $2,000.
Well,
that's great.
It's funny, Russ. I believe they found this woman not guilty, but a friend of mine who works for CBC was injured after there was a woman who climbed up a crane in downtown Toronto a few years ago, and she was arrested for basically I think it was on a construction site, and they charged her with violating private property. And my reporter friend was covering her hearing, and she didn't want to talk to the press, and she ran for a cab or to get to the subway, and he was following her, and he like tore his quads chasing after her. But she was found not guilty, and I'll bet you anything she was either drunk and did it on a dare, or she went up there to take a friggin' selfie. People are idiots that do this.
Yeah. No question. They're all looking for that viral moment. It's like, I don't get that. Like, I guess if everybody wants fame that way, fantastic, but I don't get it.
she was protesting native right. I've never heard that, and if that's the case, fine. But still, there's better ways to protest native rights than to climb a crane.
Yeah, you could do it on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Now, maybe you say she's not going to get any attention from that. She'll get attention by climbing.
You know what you do? I'll give you a good way. Go to like North Dakota, any of those places that are fracking or trying to lay some gas pipeline, and go there, and you'll get noticed.
Yeah,
that's a great place to do it.
Okay, we're going to do our overrated, underrated game. We won't do it for long because people have a problem with us going on 25 minutes about talking about anything other than hockey. But we did the Beatles, we did the Stones. We're going to do Led Zeppelin now. The next one we'll do after this is the Who, because we're tackling the classics. I love Led Zeppelin; they're one of my favorite bands, but even my favorite bands, there are songs that are not, I don't think are particularly great, and they get overplayed because they're great bands. And I'll start first with the overrated. With me, the most overrated album of Led Zeppelin is 4, because Stairway to Heaven, and I love Stairway to Heaven. I would never include it as an overrated. It's just been beaten into the ground because it's been played so many times.
Sure.
But the song that I don't particularly like on that album that I think is extremely overrated is Black Dog. It's an okay song that has really been just beaten to the ground. And I now it's at the point where if I hear it on the radio, and I don't listen to the radio much anymore, but if I have it on my iPod, which I do, I quickly click to the next song because I just heard it so many times. And it's not a particularly great song. It's okay. But it gets on my nerves. Peter, what is your most overrated Zeppelin song?
This is a tricky one because a lot of the Zeppelin songs that you people hear and love, they are also sort of things that are kind of their riffs off are really great blues songs. And look, there's no question that Jimmy Page was not shy about borrowing things, but he borrowed a lot of chord progressions. He didn't necessarily borrow total compositions unless you listen to Willie Dixon and Whole Lotta Love.
Sure.
So I really like Whole Lotta Love. It's one of my favorite songs, but it's also vastly overrated because they did have to pay a settlement fee on that song for basically stealing it from Willie Dixon. So that's my overrated.
Okay, Russ, you're overrated.
Overrated, Ramble On. I mean, that song gets played to death on the radio. It's got about 5 lyrics, and it just repeats over and over and over. It is a rambling song, and I don't know why it ever got the radio play it did.
Okay. Underrated, I have a tie. I have to say that I think that Led Zeppelin 1 could be the best debut album I've ever heard. It's one of the best. And
I don't know. I mean, I could argue with Boston with theirs.
Sure.
That was revolutionary. I could argue with Kansas with theirs.
I said one of the best. I'm not saying the best, but they recorded it in I think it was 3 or 4 days. It was it was a marathon session, and most of they weren't recording with 16 track or 24 track. I think they were just playing in the studio, and they did it all. It was basically a live recording, or at most it was 2 or 3 tracks. So, but for the representative of that album, it would be "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," because it's just an incredible song. And Led Zeppelin 3 is extremely underrated as well. And the song off that album that just kills me every time I listen to it is "Since I've Been Loving You." It's the guitar solo by Page in the middle of it is blistering. It's phenomenal. Okay, Peter, underrated.
Underrated. There's a lot of great songs by Led Zeppelin. Probably my favorite underrated song that doesn't get a lot of radio play, but is still just an absolute shaker of a tune, is The Rover from Physical Graffiti. Just an absolute shaker. Just serious guitar riff. Absolutely amazing. But I do agree with you. There's a lot on Led Zeppelin 1, the debut album, that gets overlooked. And another favorite song of mine is Good Times, Bad Times.
Yeah.
Awesome song. But yeah, The Rover, and then say Good Times, Bad Times. There's
How Many More Times is another great song.
Oh, yeah.
I only wanted to keep it to 2. Okay, Russ, underrated.
Well, the interesting thing about Zeppelin is they're not even on my iPod. I know a lot of songs and a lot of their words.
Right.
Played all through my childhood, but it never really stuck with me past the 80s. But I'm going to go Immigrant Song, even though the last couple of years it did end up in a couple of fight scenes like in Dark World, and there was another Netflix movie that a TV series that it ended up in. But I think the guitar work in that is great. I think that's underrated guitar work, and I think that it doesn't get the mention that a lot of the other songs do.
I think the strangest use of a Zeppelin song as part of a soundtrack, and I love the movie Argo with Ben Affleck about the Iranian or U.S. Officials that got away from the embassy and were protected by the Canadian embassy until they were snuck out. They're waiting to get out, and they start playing at the embassy. They start playing When the Levee Breaks, which is it was sort of cool, but I was like, okay, that's sort of random. But okay, let's get the show started here. I have a few things to talk about, and we'll take some questions in the chat. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, August 28th, 2019.
I am Peter Tessier in moderately balmy Winnipeg.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology. Frank is unfortunately in Disney, where he is blistering in the sun and won't get to hear Peter.
Yeah.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's start with retirement news. Cam Ward, who I believe
I thought you were retiring. Oh,
no. Believe me, I'll be working till I die. The Cam Ward, who won the Conn Smythe Trophy in 2006 when the Carolina Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup. He was a rookie that year, correct, Russ?
Yep.
Okay. He is retired at the age of 35. He played all but one season with the Carolina Hurricanes, 27 shutouts, a record of 334, 256 and 88, 908 career save percentage. I mean, a good goaltender for the majority of his career, had some ups and downs, but started to slip late in his career, had a terrible year with a bad Blackhawks team. But all in all, I think a very good goaltender. Russ, what did you think of Cam Ward?
No, he was. And, you got to watch him during that playoff run when he took over the job from Martin Gerber. And it was interesting because for that Game 7, we were in Carolina and we got into the locker room early. Like, it was a weird thing. We went a different way, and we're in the locker room and no reporters were there. The only people in the locker room were CBC setting up and maybe one other network. And so we just hung around, right? And so we saw Cam Ward walk in with the Conn Smythe, and he's like, what do I do with it? Like, because he's carrying it. And we were like, I don't know, let's put it over there if you're done with it. I mean, it was like a funny moment because, and guys were just strolling off the ice and we're just like, why are you two here and nobody else? It was really funny. And now, of course, they don't even do it in the locker room anymore. They do it out on the ice. But he was everything to them in that run. Edmonton was like a surprise team in a way. I mean, they had no goaltending, right? I mean,
everyone kept getting injured.
Right.
Yeah, they were on their third goalie.
And Chris Pronger was playing 49 minutes a night, and that his playoffs alone that year were worthy of MVP.
Yeah,
if you could vote for it, the way he played in that postseason was worthy of an MVP award.
Yeah, and had Pronger playing for them, and like Steve Stais, and
for Fernando Pisani.
Yeah,
Mike Pekka. I mean, that was sort of a hodgepodge team, and they went through three goaltenders, and it was a really weird playoff because remember, Buffalo played Carolina in the conference final, and Carolina used Cam Ward and they used the former Kane goal. Martin Gerber. Used Martin Gerber at a couple points during the playoffs, and they only got to the Cup final because guys like Jeff Gilson and Rory Fitzpatrick were playing defense for the Sabres in Game 7 because they were so decimated with injuries. So, it was a good team. And if you look at the roster of the Carolina Hurricanes at that point, I mean, it turned, Brind'Amour and other really good players. But they really got lucky that they ran up against teams like Edmonton and Buffalo that were decimated by injuries.
But let's not sell them short. That top line was one of the best in hockey. Andrew Ladd was a stud back then.
Yes.
So let's not forget any of that. But Cam Ward was the driver of it. He really was. Brind'Amour was a big deal too, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But Cam Ward was the driver of it, and I was very impressed with him because he didn't let it get to his head. I don't think he's one of those goalies that will look at it and say, well, that was like the only good year in his career, and then he sort of tailed off. I just think it was one of those situations where Carolina tailed off, and Cam Ward played a load of games for a lot of years, and after a while, it took its toll on him. I think he was one of those goalies, if he had load management, he'd still be playing now.
Well, I think this is a sign, not to say he didn't sort of drift off at the end of his career, but we always talk about goalies being good into their late 30s or maybe even early 40s. I mean, you've seen with Luongo, because he played the butterfly all that time, guys like J.S. Giguère, who played the butterfly, their hips wear out after a while, and they can't play that deep into their careers, whereas goalies in the past, guys like Glenn Hall and Sawchuk, played into their 40s, and even later on, other goaltenders did as well. It's only the top echelon goalies, Peter, like Lundqvist, that I think are capable of going into their late 30s. Brodeur as well. It's not going to be the guys who, I mean, Cam Ward was a very good goalie, but he was never top 3 or 4 in the league.
No,
Yeah,
you're right, Mike. It's the elite guys who seem to be able to play that 65 to 70 games a year. And yes, their time gets managed, but Dominic Hasek was like that. Who else? I mean, there's a few.
Bobby Bullen played 72 one year, I think.
Yeah, Bobby Bullen,
maybe 75, maybe even 75 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are they managed to do it. I've always said that, in front of a great athlete who has longevity and performance, the greats, there's a whole world we don't see about how they manage their day-to-day lives, what they don't do, what they support away from their performance moments on screen or in person, as you may see them. But there's a little bit of luck and genetic lottery that comes into this, how your body responds to things, what you're able to do. That's why it's not done all the time. That's why you don't see it's exceptional when athletes can do that. And, you can think of many of them in hockey and other sports too. Mm. And there's a little bit of luck. You don't have those weird career injuries and stuff. It's incredible, really. And, for Ward, he wasn't one of those guys, but, he managed to eke out a career.
It's a demanding position. The one thing I hate, as you know, is the one-day contract. Can we please stop with the one-day contract? Because it even gets reported, like someone reported, where now the Hurricanes have 3 goalies, or they have another goalie. No, they don't. He's not hitting the ice.
Well, what's the definition when you have 3 goaltenders? You don't have one. And in this case,
it's like, just stop. We know Cam Ward is pretty much a Hurricane. We get it. We don't need the one-day contract. Just stop.
Yeah, it's a PR thing. That's all it is. I mean, I get it, but it is sort of lame now. It's like, it's symbolic. I mean, okay, he played everyone except every game except I think it was 33 for the Carolina Hurricanes. So honor him with a Cam Ward night. You don't have to make a fake contract and sign him and just issue a press release congratulating him on his career. And you don't have to go down that road. The one thing though, and then we'll move on from this. I mean, this is sort of symbolic of where the NHL is going. Now, he's 35 and his career is over with. We've seen it in the NFL, especially with running backs. I think less so in Major League Baseball, but that it probably will happen there. But in the NHL, you used to see regularly defensemen go into their mid to late 30s. Guys like Teppo Numminen in Buffalo, James Patrick in Buffalo last around to their mid 30s. Guys, there's still the guys like Patrick Marleau who last into their 40s, or Yager, but it's now the exception rather than the rule. And we see with the focus now on these RFAs on their second contract, where a few years ago, they would have been content to take a 2 or 3 year bridge deal or a 4 or 5 year deal for lesser money because they were going to hit their big money at 27 or 28. Now they realize their careers could be over by 31 or 32, and they have to get paid now. And that's the trend. That's the trend that has changed the face of the NHL, Peter.
Absolutely. You're making more money earlier on. You're not like, remember back in the 90s and in the early 2000s when you were a UFA at 31 and guys were just getting an exorbitant amount of money for, that's when the bad contract graveyard just came in. I mean, thank God for most of them there wasn't a salary cap then, because it would have just killed teams. You remember Bobby Halik at one point was making $10 million a year.
Yeah,
it's insanity.
I remember that, Peter. I covered the Rangers.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember that contract, Russ.
Oh yeah, and what's his face? The guy who lived in the minors. They finally had to bend the rule.
Wade Redden.
Yeah, Redden. See, there's a name you haven't heard in ages. Well, it's just so now it's a different thing, and it's made the game a little more cutthroat. It's made it a little more like the NFL. You've got to be smart. You've got to work your tail off and get your position, because we've talked about this many times on the podcast before. There is the guys coming into the game now between the ages of 18 and 21 have never been better prepared to play professional sports and hockey than ever. Right. They are trained out the yin. They've been training for 15 years practically, and they've never been in better condition. And and the GMs, the coaches know that. And if you can't perform, there's a younger guy who's cheaper looking to make big bucks sooner who will take your spot.
Yeah, and the funny thing, just on that whole league contract, Russ, I remember when it was basically justified by, I think that was a Sather contract, correct?
Yeah,
it was justified as he neutralized the top centers in the league or in the East, like Lindros or Sundin, but they paid a checking center who scored maybe 20 goals a year, $9 million on, I think, a 5-year deal. And just like, what are you doing?
The problem was like a lot of bigger guys, his eye hand slowed down. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when he would score from the crease in the past, he couldn't do it anymore. And so then you literally just had a guy who you expected just to play gritty and big on the ice. And to be honest, like, he wasn't overly aggressive anymore. And so, it was one of those things where Holik was past it. And I think the Rangers signed him simply to keep him away from the Devils. I really do.
Yeah. And, it was just bizarre. But you remember, this was the pre-cap. So you could basically pay anybody anything, and you could make it go away like Lou Lamoriello made Vladimir Malakov's contract go away.
He did the second year in the Rangers.
And McGillney too. Yeah.
I do want to point this out. Like, his first year, he had 16 goals, 35 points. It was abysmal. The second year was better. He had 25 goals, 56 points.
Right.
That's not terrible for him. So I think the issue was then it was just like too many expectations for the salary. And then after that, he never got over 15 goals. But just his overall effectiveness just wasn't fantastic. Now,
just to touch on a little bit of, I saw this on Twitter via somebody else because this particular agent has blocked me. But Alan Walsh announced that he is now representing former Canadiens defenseman Andrei Markov. That he has added Markov to his clientele, and that he's been intensively training in Florida this summer and is determined to play in the NHL this year. Well, that's all great, but he's, I believe, 41.
Yeah.
And if you looked at his statistics last year, he dropped like a stone in the K. Yeah. So I don't care if he's been working out with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can't cheat Father Time. And if Montreal, who is weak on the left side of their D, wasn't willing to give him a 1-year deal just to see what was there, I don't think anybody else is.
I mean, if I were a GM, I wouldn't care if he was training for like the Scooby-Doo Laugh Olympics. I wouldn't care. Like, he's just past it. It's just, and again, if Montreal signs him, he is just there to get to the 1,000 games, and then he is going to fade away quickly. They have to know that.
I mean, Peter, do you think that's what it is? Do you think he's just doing what Plekanec did? He went back to Montreal, played, I think, 3 games, got over 1,000, and said goodbye?
Yeah, it could happen. I mean, why not? I mean, it's
how does it help your team, Peter? It doesn't help. It doesn't help your team, though.
No, the problem is that it's Montreal has to be copacetic to just flushing money down the toilet, because that's all they're doing, right?
Right.
And if that's a good PR move for the Habs, and I could actually see them doing that. Like, I think that's something that could maybe right or wrong, so to speak, for them in a PR situation. But you got to talk Jeff Molson into pissing away, a few $100,000 to $1 million to do it. But it's a shame that Markov has that age curve drop, right? He was a very talented guy. He was smart on the ice. He was very efficient in how he worked the ice in his later years. He compensated for what Nick Lidstrom said, I couldn't keep up, so I'm done. Right? Like, he found ways to compensate for that and managed to play a vital role. Lidstrom was different, and there's another athlete who played a long time who was incredible. Lidstrom just couldn't play at the level he wanted to play at, which is a different issue. But there are probably a couple teams out there who could use a Markov in their makeup, just from a point of view of, you can give the guy third line minutes in sheltered areas and not expect him to be Andrei Markov from 2004.
Yeah, but how did Chelios help Atlanta? He didn't. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're looking at now. I mean, Chelios was much older. I get it. But that's really what you're looking at now.
I don't think, given who Atlanta was then, I don't think they had the understanding of sheltering players.
Yeah.
Usage. That level of understanding of how to do that wasn't in the lexicon, particularly for them back then. It may have been for some smarter teams, but you'd have to have a coach who understood it. Yeah. And and a GM and a roster that could use that. And I'm not sure, there's probably a couple teams out there who might have the roster for it. I don't know if they have the coach or the GM who could see it.
I mean,
looking at you, Canucks.
It's his fault, though, because a couple of years ago, he wanted 2 years, and the Habs only would give him a year, and he's like, no. He gets all pissed off. Remember, there was this whole...
Yep, absolutely. He was ready to go.
He has nobody to blame but himself.
He does. That was something his agent should have talked to him about. And said, look, you are now on the 1-year contract. See how you feel at the end of it. It's exactly what the Leafs probably should have done with Marleau.
Yeah.
In terms of 1 year, maybe pay him $7 million that first year. And it's exactly what Joe Thornton has done. Joe Thornton did with San Jose.
Yeah.
But other suitors for Marleau, so they couldn't have gotten him for that.
Yeah, the problem was the third year was the determining factor. He was not. He would have stayed in San Jose, or he would have gone someplace else if he didn't get the third year from Toronto, and then that in the end cost Toronto a first-round pick to get rid of it. Now, a team like Washington or a team like Tampa Bay, if they had a spot on their bottom pairing and they wanted to pair him with a younger guy and they limited him to 11 or 12 minutes a night, that might be a fit. But that's very limiting, and I don't know if anybody is going to be willing.
They're not going to do that. I mean, they're either going to do it for the PR sake or they're not going to do it at all. I don't know if another team is going to want them. I think another team is going to have to be pretty desperate.
And I don't think Alan Walsh is emissive on Twitter, to attracting attention to the fact that he's representing Andrei Markov. And I think in some instances that's going to hurt him, because Alan Walsh doesn't have as many friends as he thinks of in the league. Now, okay, just continuing on this sort of bent here. If you look at the available free agents, unrestricted free agents still out there, a lot of them have the same thing in common. Over the age of 35 or close to being 35. Dion Phaneuf is 34 years old. There hasn't been one inkling of even a PTO for Phaneuf. It's still surprising. And again, I think this is a symptom of the Sharks wanting to make an announcement at the same time, probably around the start of training camp, that Patrick Marleau is not signed at 39 years old. Thornton has not been signed as well, but I'm assuming if they're going to do it, they're going to do it together in a joint sort of statement type of thing, bringing the veteran guys back. Jason Pominville is skating informally with the Sabres, like in pre-camp practices, but there is no indication that the Sabres are going to offer him any kind of contract. And he had a pretty decent.
He's in Brandon Prust territory.
I think he's better than that, Russ. I mean, he had 16.
Hold on. If he were better than that, he'd be signed already.
Well, it may be the fact that he wants to play in only certain places, like.
Okay, well.
And he did score 16 goals last year, and apparently his analytics numbers are good. But
he's a decent player. I'm not getting you on that. But if he were in demand, somebody would have found a way to sign him already. Is my point. He is not in demand.
Yeah, and there are certain players, Peter, that are limiting their choices to particular teams. Pominville may be one of them. Nicholas Kronwall, who's 38, he may have gotten offers from other teams, but apparently he only wants to go back and play with Detroit, and that's really not where Detroit is right now. Why are they going to go and bring in a veteran defenseman when they can play a Chalowski or a Roenick or one of the young defensemen and get them started on their career?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and I think. You would think that Steve Yzerman and Cronwall's agent would have had that conversation and made that clear, because it seems silly now for Detroit to bring him back. Like, what does that do for them, particularly this late in the game? You couldn't hammer this out earlier, but Cronwall's the kind of guy, right? Like, where do you put him in if you're trying to develop a team? What does he bring? Again, we use the idea of a Markov. Do you put Cronwall in that same category of player that Markov is in terms of reputation and experience? There's certainly experience.
In some ways, I'd put him higher.
Yeah, but Markov is a superior offensive player, so it's like
he was.
So it's like I still think Markov had a better career. It's just that Cronwall's got a great reputation because he's a very good defenseman.
Right.
He was never a great defenseman,
and his big thing was his checking along the boards and in the center of the ice, and he did it last year with I think Matthews in Toronto, but his big hits were few and far between, and really that type of game is not conducive to the league anymore with all the concerns. I mean, if he throws a check that's a little bit off, he gets suspended for 5 games for it being too high or too low or whatever. Another player is Dan Girardi, 35 years old. Have not heard anything in terms of him getting a PTO. Maybe he's holding out for a 1-year deal. Maybe Tampa will invite him. But with Tampa bringing in, they brought back Coburn, they brought back Ruda, they added Shen and Shattenkirk. I'm thinking that they're probably not going to add any more defensemen, Russ.
I think they're probably not. I think Girardi is going to have to wait for an injury. Again, he's not the fleetest of foot. He's a good shot blocker. He's got a lot of mileage. Somebody could use him, but somebody's going to have a need first.
Yeah.
And again, nobody does right this moment, but you get into camp, a few weeks into camp, maybe somebody gets injured, then they come calling. That's the first shot.
I think he'd be a perfect fit on the bottom pairing with Toronto, but apparently Dubas loves mobile defensemen, and
Girardi's not that.
Yeah, and he's not that, but you're not getting Jake Gardner back for $1 million for 1 year, so that's not happening.
Mitch Marner never signs.
Well, there you go. Another one is Thomas Vanek, who scored 36 points last year with Detroit. 35 years old. He's lost more than a step, but again, even in this faster league, he did score 36 points. So I'm a little surprised he hasn't had any kind of PTO from anybody.
But here's the way they work this now. Do I bring Thomas Vanek in, who, yes, can get me 36 points, doesn't play defense, is limited what he could do 5-on-5, or am I just going to give a kid in my system a break and he'll come in a little cheaper, and I'm forwarding my system and getting, everybody moves up a slot, and I'm making my system stronger. These days, most teams are going to opt for that than bringing in a guy for that amount of points. It's not enough points to to really make a difference.
Yeah, Funky Cold Zadina in the chat said, surprised Holland hasn't signed Vanek. And the thing is, you can't say that he wouldn't be amenable to going to Edmonton, because remember, he signed an offer sheet to go to Edmonton in 2007, and the Sabres matched it. So
let me answer Funky Cold Zadina in a very easy way. Ken Holland may be saying that they're going to try and compete and everything else, yes, but Ken Holland is not signing any more older players. He's not.
And with Connor, and I'm not saying he's going to miss the beginning of the season, but with Connor McDavid's uncertain health situation where he doesn't even know if he's going to be there at the opening of training camp, if he misses 5 games there in the regular season in terms at the beginning of the year, he's not going to be 100% starting at the beginning of the season, and everything is tied to McDavid being good. And if he's not good and he's not healthy at the beginning of the year, they're a last place team.
And I don't think the fan base wants to see any more 35-year-olds either, to be honest.
No. Right. Play Kaylor Yamamoto.
Yep.
Give him an opportunity.
Yep, they'd rather see that.
Other names: Ben Lovejoy. Brian Boyle is he scored 18 goals last year, and Brian Boyle hasn't received a contract or a PTO.
Again, Brian Boyle has slowed down a lot. So a lot of teams now have a guy for 4C, and a lot of teams are using like a younger guy for 3C because they want to be faster.
Yeah,
you've got to have a reason to want Brian Boyle on your team. Is it for penalty killing and a little bit of 4C? Then you could find a slot for him, but it's pretty limited. And I think that's why he's not signed.
But Peter, I look at and I grant everything that Russ just said. I think he's slowing down. He's a bigger guy, but he still scored 18 goals last year in a faster league. You would think that somebody, unless his contract demands in terms of money are way out of whack, that he would have received an offer and taken one by now.
These are the curious ones, right? Like, you look at just the basic numbers and you go, what's missing here? What don't we understand about this? And I think you hit it, Mike. The contract demands are probably significant. They probably started fairly significant too. And as teams are buying players, spending money, you sort of lose the ability to keep spending money, and you lose the ability for you to fit in. So now he's sort of late in the year. Mm-hmm. He's got to find a team that's going to pay him near what he wants, and that isolates down who you can do, because those teams may not want him.
Well, here's a good answer.
You've got to, your agent has to market yourself appropriately, and that's their job. They're salesmen too,
right? But look at it this way. So last year he was a -13 with the Devils. He was a -1 with Nashville. He had 7 power play goals. So take away the 7 power play goals, and now all of a sudden,
11 goals, 5 on 5.
Yeah, and he only had 6 assists. You could get that much cheaper from within your own system. You can.
Okay. Talk about this, and then we'll take some questions in the chat. The face of hockey coverage is sort of changing before our eyes. We've seen, names, and this. He was more a broadcaster covering general sports in Toronto for years, like Bob McCowan, who was let go by Sportsnet a month or so ago. But in terms of the Sportsnet hockey coverage, we've seen Scott Morrison let go. We've seen Doug McLean let go, who was a co-host of Hockey Central. Darren Millard was let go last year. Bob Cole has retired, and now today it's announced that Nick Kyprios and Sportsnet have split, and Kyprios is. It was couched as they're going their separate ways. We know that Sportsnet has had significant budgetary problems based on the losses they've incurred because of the NHL contract they signed. And Kyprios has been with Sportsnet since, I think, the beginning of Sportsnet.
98.
Yeah, so he's been there for over 20 years, and now he's out. And Peter, it's, you know, I mean, I have friends and colleagues who work at Sportsnet. They're great, and you know, I'm sure they'll carry on and do a great job. But we just see like these people that we have recognized as being part of their coverage, and now they're no longer there simply because of budgetary reasons.
Look, there's no secret in this industry that Sportsnet cannot sell ads at the rate it needs to pay out the money to the National Hockey League. They're sinking. And it's happening in more than a few markets, even on regional deals. There is a problem with the broadcast model and the money the NHL is commanding versus what can be sold. That's it. So eventually you have one choice. You can't renegotiate the deal. You can only sell so much at a certain price point. You have one thing you can control as a business, and that's your expenses.
Right.
And just like overpaying guys on a team and avoiding bad contracts, Sportsnet's taking the business approach with Kyprios, and they're probably saying he's been here 20 years. He's probably got some pretty significant salary expectations. What are they? And they've had those conversations. They said, we can't do that. It doesn't make sense for us. We have to keep cutting and cutting until we can get things in line. Mm-hmm. So what you're looking for, and it's no different in any cycle of business, but it's particularly brutal in the media world right now, not just hockey media, but all media, all like channels of media, in that you want to get people in who are hungrier, looking to get the big paycheck, and try and negotiate that and realize that you gave them the forum to start and that you have some leverage over them, as opposed to trying to attract talent and just buy it as a free agent or keep re-signing people who are there. And in fairness,
more than that, you know what else? Because there are so many options that it's hard to be like that massive giant that gets all the ratings anymore. It is hard to do that.
You have to be the best of the best to get those things.
Yeah.
Right. The two big heavyweights in Canada, which means for the NHL in terms of media names, are Bob McKenzie and Elliot Friedman.
Right.
Everyone else falls beneath them. If you're not one of them, you're those are your upper echelon.
Yeah.
We know Bob, and he's been open about it, is coming sort of near the end of his frequency of appearances. He wants to sort of fade out a little bit and do things on his terms.
Yeah, he's basically saying he's going to retire after this year, or at least step back.
Yeah, step back, maybe come back and do the World Juniors, do some things he really likes doing.
Right.
Elliot will take over the mantle of the top dog, and rightfully so. He's done everything to earn that, and there is no one better. The issue now comes is, how do you fill in for content? What are you going to do? And this is where I think people have to really look at Sportsnet and consider, what's their long-term content strategy? Because they've got all the platforms, but you have to fill it with something. And that's where the keys are going to come about what they're going to do. And I think it's already out there a little bit of where they're going. I think now we're going to start seeing the real change. And as much as George Stroumboulopoulos was a debacle when they first got the rights, you don't always learn by being right. You learn by being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they were wrong on a lot of fronts there, but if they were smart, they learned a lot. And I think we're just starting to see what they're learning and where they're going to go with that. But it'll be really interesting. But you got to make room for change, and Kyprios was taking up space.
Yeah, and I think that the onus, just like with TSN, unless things massively change, you know, when Bob McKenzie takes a step back after next year, you're probably going to see Pierre LeBrun and Darren Drager take a bigger role in terms of being the insiders for TSN. I mean, I know, I agree with you, and I know Elliot Friedman. He's a great guy, and he's tops in the business. Chris Johnston as well is going to probably take a much bigger role. He's very well connected and a really, really smart and great guy. So I think he will step into probably some of the role that Kyprios had. But they had 3 insiders, and they basically said, okay, we can afford 2, and that's probably what the whole situation was. And I mean, it sucks for Kyprios, and I hope he finds another opportunity out there somewhere. Maybe NBC in the States. I don't know if he wants to uproot from Toronto, but that might be an opportunity for him.
I think if you just take the idea of insiders and you sort of compare one to the other with TSN and Sportsnet, TSN always had the advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with the way things have changed and the eventual sort of what Rogers did when they went for that NHL deal was to say, we think we can make money on it, but we can also basically cripple the competition in this by the longevity of the deal. So what we're going to do is it's like waiting them out, and we know we've got a younger stable, and we're going to push that through. They tried it too quick, and now they're coming back around. So when you take Bob McKenzie out, Darren Dreger, as nice a guy as he is sort of how much we see of him. There's a little bit of suspicion around his modus operandi when it comes to some things. And we all know what that's around, how he's reported on things in the past or sides he's taken. He hasn't been entirely impartial. And the way he presents things. LeBrun's probably your guy. But again, you've got to be able to package something around those guys. And that's what I think Sportsnet is really betting on, is that in the next few years, you take Bob out, they're going to have a better opportunity to package around their guys. And what we see coming is going to be fascinating.
Just to give you an example, to take this to an area where what money is being spent on and where teams find it important. So yesterday, the Flyers started to install their massive scoreboard. It's the world's first 4K kinetic center hung scoreboard. This thing is massive. It's 50% more screen than it used to have. There's crazy stuff that's coming out of it. Like there's going to be lights shown out of it. And, I made the joke that, well, the Astrodome had the exploding scoreboard back in the day when I was there. And they did, except it was in like stick figure. But they're spending a lot of money on it. I don't know how much, but that tells you that, yes, like as an example, we will spend a lot of money on players, but we're spending a lot on this to make sure fans are entertained, just in case.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. Bells and whistles. Let's just say this. I think that teams want to improve their in-game experience for their fans. And I could offer suggestions, not that teams would listen, but I could offer suggestions based on me going to as many games as I have over the years. And, I'm an older demographic, but, the blaring music, these are some of the things that they should get rid of. But I think like the bells and whistles of a scoreboard, of like certain things that they do during the game, I think would attract people to come to games more readily. But there are a lot of things that they do right now, I think, that are turnoffs.
I think everyone around the league should be taking notice of what Carolina did this past season. They should be taking notice of what Nashville's done. They should be taking notice of some of these markets that weren't your traditional hockey markets and where they're having success, because what's happening in larger markets and established markets is you've always got your hardcores, right. But what's happening is that the hardcores will watch it any way they can get, right? They don't have to be in the building. It's right. The people who are willing to spend $12 a beer, can spend $175 on a ticket and make it a night out. And if that means corporate or it means sort of entertainment, you have to sort of throw in other entertainment, because sometimes the games are boring as hell. Mm-hmm. And it's not there. You need to make sure people come out of that feel like, well, they tried their hardest, but I had a great night. You got
right. Well, here's more
finish off with a great night.
Mm-hmm. So that scoreboard was delivered in 19 trucks. It's 90,000 pounds. It's $15 million, and it looks like it retracts, like it goes out for a while when they want to show like full video, and then we'll go in a little bit when they don't. Like, it's crazy.
Well, I wonder if it's as big as the one in Tampa, because that one is like –
it's bigger than Tampa, and It's the same size as Dallas, or similar size, I should say. I don't know if it's the same. Similar size to Dallas, but Dallas's is affixed to a wall, and this one's at center ice, so this is the first one like in the center of play.
Wow. Hopefully it doesn't collapse like the one in Buffalo did. Okay, we'll take a couple questions.
Buffalo, Mike. This is Philadelphia. We don't do things like that.
I'm not touching that one. Andrew Strauss asks, do you guys think that Braden Point will take less long-term like the other core bolts? Well, okay.
No, the answer is no.
He won't take less in the sense that, I think he wants to get paid at the same level that Stamkos and Kucherov do. But the thing is that he might take less because the Florida state taxes, and he'll get more money on a lower deal than he would someplace else. So if he gets, I think he's going to get paid around what Stamkos is making, which is
less. That's less than he would take from another team, but that's not less than his teammates. Which
right,
is
right. I think
he's going to be right in line with them, but he's not taking a discount.
No. The hometown discounts are done. They're over with. Nobody will do them anymore. Funky asks, hypothetical question. If the Leafs flame out in the first round of the playoffs and the Leafs fire Babcock, would he go back to Detroit to coach the Red Wings? Would Yzerman want him?
Yeah, I think there would be a discussion because I think Jeff Blashill gets discussed every year, right? Even though he got an extension.
Sure.
So, yes, there would definitely be a discussion, and yes, they would definitely consider it.
And I think there would be more than one suitor. But no one. The thing is no one's going to give Babcock the kind of money he already has. He's coming off.
Yeah, if Edmonton had not hired Tippett, if they'd hired somebody else who's like a first-time coach, I would say that guy would be in trouble if Babcock got fired because I think Holland, even though Holland at the end of their relationship got a little sick of Babcock trying to push things around and exert his control.
He didn't get sick of winning, though.
He didn't get sick of winning, exactly. And I can just imagine Babcock with McDavid. But see, this is the thing. And this Funky asks, puts us in a hypothetical situation in terms of them flaming out in the first round of the playoffs.
That's his hope.
The funny thing is, I have heard from people saying that even if they're in a playoff spot in the middle of the year, if they're not doing what Dubas and Shanahan believe they should be doing, that Babcock would be under fire and possibly fired during the season. I don't think there's a chance in hell of that happening. I think he gets the entire year and he gets the playoffs. And if they get past the first round, he's staying. If they lose in the first round and lose badly like they have, and I consider losing in 7 games to the Bruins when they were, I think, an equally talented team, those were bad losses. They should have gotten past the first round in one of these 2 series. They didn't. I think he's in deep trouble if they lose in the first round again. Let's see. Any more questions here? Solution says I should be the next on the air at Sportsnet. I'm not sure what the color of the sky in your world is, but I'd like to see it. Let's see. Did Babs and Yzerman work together on Team Canada? Yes, I believe they did. Yeah. And Yzerman was an assistant GM under Holland in Detroit, so there's a relationship there. I don't know how good it is, but I would think that that's a that is a possibility if Babcock is a free agent. Let's see here. Terry GGG. Let's see. Päivärinta signing in Finland 1-year deal with NHL out clause to December 1st. Thoughts, Peter? What do you think of that? Puljujärvi signed a 1-year deal in Karpat, but he has an out to get back to the NHL if he's traded by Edmonton before December 1st. Peter?
We can't hear you.
You froze up.
That better?
Yes.
Sorry, I turned my mic down. Sorry, I was just having background noise. Sorry, I have no problem with what he's doing. It's amazing how many people all of a sudden have the most incredible insight on Puljujärvi's development situation now in hindsight after 3 years?
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible where this this library of knowledge was for the past 3 years. It's incredible. I think why wasn't this being touted ages ago? The fact of the matter is this is a prospect that's been mishandled by the Oilers for a lot of reasons. And the player may have some responsibility in that. I don't shirk him of responsibility, but the team also has to look at how do you integrate this in there. And if you want to make getting 6 minutes a rite of passage and you have to earn it like you did in the 70s and 80s, you're in the wrong profession now. That's gone. That whole mentality is gone. You need to give players a position to succeed with their strengths and help them figure out their weaknesses. It's not figure out your weaknesses, then you'll get a chance to succeed. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah, I look at it and I say, this is how desperate he was to be traded. They didn't trade him, so now he's going to play. At least he's going to play, and I think it's good for him. So I don't have a problem with him doing it. Now the issue will be, can they trade him to make him sign his out? Because if he doesn't like the deal or where he's going, he's just staying over there. He's got the hammer now, and before he didn't, but now he does.
Yeah. Last question here from Bob Dracula. With all the new talent on the Rangers, is Quinn on a short leash this year? I would say no.
No, he is not. The longer term you have as a coach on your contract, the more power you have. And he's got a lot of term left. So no, he's fine. They just built up the team, so is there more pressure on Quinn? Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to expect results with the addition of Panarin and the addition of Trouba, Fox. I think, they should contend for a wild card spot. They have to show growth.
They do.
But if they don't, then I think he might be on the short leash next year, but not this year.
No, not this year.
There's gonna be a natural. Well, we got to see how all these pieces fit together.
Even next year, he's got 3 years left on his deal.
Yeah,
I don't think they would buy him out even next year. He's good for a couple more years, easy.
Yeah. Okay, good show. We will be back with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast tomorrow. At some point, we will pay attention to my Twitter feed at Mike and Buffalo for when we will have the show. Either it'll be a 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, but we'll make it known before those times. For the departed Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.